Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad speaking. It's great to be with you. And today we have a lot of information about NEO to talk about. I've been researching it for quite some time and I've done this video a few times and hopefully this time it works. But basically guys, I wanted to talk to you about key NEO information, key NEO tech, things that are coming out right now that will explain why NEO is such a phenomenal investment for now and the future. So stay tuned because I'm going to definitely be going deep into the NEO world. So let's get started. So guys, you can see that I've actually started with the NEO team blog. And what I wanted to do is just basically touch on each of the different websites that I've chosen today. I've chosen roughly about 10. So it's going to take a bit of time to unpack. So stay with me. And if you don't have a cuppa, go and grab one. I'm a big coffee fan, so yeah, definitely send me some coffee if you ever want. So here we go. NEO team blog. Why NEO is so damn good and what the hell is NEO? Well, I've decided for all those people who aren't quite sure to give you some key bits of information before we get stuck into the deep stuff. Basically, NEO is what's called an open source, non-for-profit, generic public blockchain protocol and blockchain structure and ecosystem. Its aim basically is to build an open network that utilizes digital assets, digital identities, and smart contracts. So whilst this is rehashing what many people have been saying, it just gives you an inroad into what this company is all about. It is so robust and so comprehensive as an ecosystem, and that's what we need to be looking for when we're looking for mainframe or main chain blockchains, the ones that are going to act as hubs for the rest of the blockchain sphere. So basically guys, to get stuck into the NEO team blog, it's always great to see NEO posts like this. It explains the fundamentals. It also explains that it's essentially a core technology that we need to know about. So let's move on and we'll get into some of the key bits of information that perhaps will paint a clear picture as to what makes NEO such a phenomenal investment today. The first one is actually looking at the Reddit post about NEO and on-chain. In terms of on-chain, I don't want to sort of confuse too many people about what it stands for, but I want to explain why I do talk about it. And that's because it is the enterprise blockchain of that's interrelated with NEO. It is the privatized, permissioned blockchain that's designed to set up a framework or an architecture via its DNA system to allow all the businesses of China that are interested to append onto that blockchain as autonomous, self-governing, self-trusting blockchains. So that just simply means, in a nutshell, it is the business sphere. On-chain is all about enterprise, and the people who designed NEO also designed the structures that are put in place and the architecture for on-chain. So guys, what this post is all about is trying to understand what the heck it is. So here's some key points to remember. Underpinning on-chain is a thing called DNA. That stands for the Distributed Networks Architecture. And essentially what that's about, guys, hang on, I just need some coffee. Awesome. So basically what that explains is that on-chain is a sophisticated blockchain, and it has a protocol much like the DBFT, the Delegated Byzantine Fault Tolerance protocols that NEO represent. And that's really important. Because of that similarity, they already have sort of that conversant aspect, that interrelationship. But more importantly is that they have the CEO representation of Da Hongfei and Eric themselves. So guys, if you want to know more about on-chain, I don't want to bore you to death, but it is an amazing not subsidiary, it is a separate entity. It's absolutely interlinked with it, and I'm going to tell you some things in a moment that are going to blow your mind in terms of what on-chain can do for the NEO investor. All right, let's move on to some really good quality interviews. Now the next thing I want to talk about is actually by Da Hongfei himself. It's in Chinese, so unless you speak Chinese, it's pretty difficult to understand. So I won't expect that you guys will go and click on it. I don't speak Chinese, I speak Japanese. But one thing you can do is you can click on to this particular website. I did that and it led me to some key information which I'm going to go into now. It explained in its translation that essentially AntShares, which is now NEO, it was the very first blockchain in China in terms of a public blockchain established in its current ecosystem. Also, on-chain was a secondary blockchain that evolved as a result, which I thought was really interesting. So they've already understood the importance of the public blockchain. They've understand the premise of the first and second generation public blockchains, with that being Bitcoin and with Ethereum, in terms of their applications and their functions. Now what they've done is they've realized the importance of enterprise. And so they've found a way to interlink that with NEO as I would argue is the #1 public blockchain in China. So, moving on. Here's a massive quote that really piqued my interest in this particular article, and this was from Da Hongfei himself. He says, "In the future, cross-chain interoperability will allow for deeper connections between public blockchains like NEO and various consortium blockchains like on-chain." So the idea is that if you can start to read between the lines, there's a lot more happening in the enterprise space for NEO. I mean, a lot of people think that it isn't, but it is. And we're going to talk about exactly how that is at a tech level soon. But there's no question in my mind, when the more you look into interviews like this, the better it's looking for NEO because of the interrelationships it has with big business and with government as well. Okay, so moving on to the next thing that I wanted to broach with you was a really exciting interview. And that interview was conducted by a business member, business bloke in China. And he did this obviously with Da Hongfei, and he asked some really important questions. So I'm just going to focus on the key answers from Da Hongfei himself. And Da basically said in his response that on-chain benefits from the NEO ecosystem. And I always looked at it the other way, and until he said it, I was just astounded that he's right in that. Of course he's right, but it's so relevant for the NEO investor because NEO was the initial construct. It was the precept and it was the foundations for on-chain. So then he went on to say that NEO is very similar to DNA. So they have again that intrinsic link of architectural and protocol structures. Then he also very importantly said this. He went on to explain that and you can check it out throughout the video. He said that there's going to be a cross-chain compatibility and interoperability between on-chain and NEO. Now that is really exciting, guys, because what he's actually saying, if you listen to the last part of the video, is that in the future, there's going to be through NEOX a means in which these two entities can interact together. Now at the moment they are distinct, they are separate, and they are, for very good reasons, they are a venture capital based or backed private enterprise versus a public permissionless enterprise. But NEOX is going to change everything. It's going to bridge it all. And if you're a NEO investor, before NEOX hits, before its capacity hits the market with all these major enterprises and consortiums in China utilizing it, you are going to benefit massively from that. So again, NEOX is a major reason to invest in NEO. Moving on from that, there was also some other things that were raised, and I really encourage you to go and check out what he has to say. But essentially, the main point that sort of Da raises from this is the idea of NEO being a main chain. He doesn't use that language, but it's very clear to me that it, through all of its patents that it's put through the government, through its initiatives to work with the government and the private sector, it's essentially trying to assert itself as the main chain for several other subchains to develop via its vast ecosystem and network. So again, I regard this as an interoperable blockchain network that is going to revolutionize the way in which China, at the very least, does business. Let's move on to the next one, guys. It's really interesting. It was a post by Reddit, and it explains exactly what I'm talking about. So I like to back up what I say with evidence and information. So from there, you can see a post of a section of the NEO white paper. And in that white paper, it goes on even further and explains how NEOX operates and functions. And essentially, it's divided into two parts. It's divided into a digital asset and also a distributed transactional protocol. And that might seem like a whole bunch of jargon, but it's phenomenal in terms of its ability to allow you to purchase a share and act as if it's a transactional currency of value. So inbuilt in that, through its cross-chain compatibility, is something where you can transact from one blockchain to another. You can exchange, as probably one of the best words, you can exchange different values, points of value being the utility aspect or the governance aspect of a particular company. via smart share applications. There's also going to be new things coming out with its digital assets. So NEO is really coming to the fore, and it's, in my opinion, technologically, it can actually do more than Ethereum. As you get into it, you realize people would be pretty crazy once they start researching not to be part of the NEO investor team, because it's just so damn good. Also, I just want to harp back quickly to the video here. If you want to check out the Da Hongfei's video, just the #1 point to go to is 1240, because this is what he says. He says, in the future, with NEOX's cross-chain protocol, everything will be linked together. And that's coming from Da Hongfei himself. So guys, holy crap, that is massive. All right, now to continue on with some more information, I wanted to talk to you about Victor Huang when he spoke about the Ethereum enterprise. It's amazing, guys, what he had to say. Yes, it's a little bit old. It was published on November the 3rd, 2016. But guys, seriously, have a look at it, because as he goes through, he explains, and it makes perfect sense why enterprise is such an important word for investors and entrepreneurs in this space. I also just want to put in a little disclaimer here, is that I want to make sure people understand that I am not taking an ambivalent position or a neutral one when it comes to many of these companies, because I have investment in them. But I also want to say that I don't invest in anything I don't research. It doesn't mean that it's going to flourish, but I do a lot of research before I invest in something, and I try to understand it at a blockchain level, because that's where it makes sense to me in terms of significant growth in the future. And that's where this leads in. I wish I had seen this months and months ago. I wish I knew the word blockchain months ago, because this guy explains the interconnection between Ethereum as a generic main chain blockchain with other subchains that are waiting to append onto it. That just simply means this guy explains how they're going to do it. He explains the big consortiums and foundations that are trying to assemble some sort of confluence of power, so that they can then enact and transact in the business sphere. They have been waiting for one particular thing, and I'm going to tell you what that is in a moment, and it's so exciting. But Ethereum is equally exciting, because they've decided they've chosen Ethereum as the means in which they are going to do that via the public blockchain arena, via that via the decentralized mechanism. They could choose others, of course, but they chose Ethereum. And if you're an investor in Ethereum, you can only imagine what that's going to mean. And if you can't, definitely check out these kinds of bits of information, because it'll blow your mind what's going to happen to Ethereum and what's going to happen to NEO. So again, the main focus of this article, this post, was really just to reinforce the magnitude of enterprise within the public blockchain space, particularly in conjunction with Ethereum. Because as I said, these major players like IBM and Microsoft and all the consortium level, coupled with their own protocols that they've designed, which are basically codes, lines of code that can work with and in sync with a main generic public blockchain, provided there's a protocol that interrelates with that, or that interconnects like a portal. And there is something that Microsoft have just built, and we're going to talk about that right now. So guys, what Microsoft have actually designed is a thing called COCO. And there's a great post by Minting Coins. I learned about COCO recently, like a couple of weeks ago, and then I found his YouTube. And mate, if you're out there, thank you so much for all of your work. You're definitely worth a lot more than the credit that you get. But basically, COCO is really important, because what it does is it acts as a portal or a gateway between the distributed ledger technology that companies like Hyperledger and the R3 and Microsoft are all working on diligently. There's also corporations and consortiums that you would have heard about, like the Trusted Internet of Alliance, Trusted Internet of Things Alliance, the Ethereum the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. Those kind of consortiums, underpinning them are protocols and codes where they're trying to interconnect somehow with a public generic blockchain, but they're doing that specifically to try and make sure that it's a trusted mechanism, that it's a trusted facility, and that it's a trusted blockchain. So that's really interesting, because they want to use the public blockchain, they want to use the decentralized mechanism, and they want to use a permissionless space like Ethereum, but they want to do it on their terms. And they've been waiting for one technology to come along that'll enfranchise that with their protocols, and that's called COCO. Oh my God, guys. If you don't know what COCO is, you have to learn, because this is a game changer. It's run by Microsoft Azure. It's amazing. What it can do is phenomenal, because essentially it's a really sophisticated protocol that allows for the virtual machine of Ethereum to transact and interact with the ledger technology, so that it can permissionalize or permission, for want of a better verb, it can permission all of the smart contracts that Ethereum previously or currently is using in a permissionless way. And the reason why that's so important is not from the ideological standpoint of Bitcoin, which was essentially to be a decentralized, peer-to-peer, non-third-party entity. It's actually the converse, and essentially so. Again, I'm averse to it in one respect, because it's not necessarily advantageous for a society, but in terms of a capitalist market, which we are in and we are part of, this is a phenomenal thing, because it finally it provides a platform of trust for businesses who previously said no to blockchain because they couldn't ensure that it was secure, that it was trusted, and that it had some means of a closed source. So this is where COCO comes in, because it is off-chain. And that's really important, because it means it's highly scalable and it's highly applicable to blockchain in a way that Plasma can't even compete. Because Plasma works in a different way. Plasma, with Poon and Vitalik's work, it works on top of the blockchain, of the Ethereum MainChain blockchain. And it's done via smart contracts, whereas this other protocol is specifically designed to work to allow not only the consortiums to work through Ethereum, but also that of Microsoft and that of any other blockchain that wants to append onto it. So the list is endless, the possibilities are endless because of COCO. It is a game changer, and it's just been released in August, and I don't know why more people aren't realizing the power of this. This explains to me why there was such a massive jump in the value of Ethereum recently. It explains to me why also there's been a major shift in the value of NEO, and we're going to allude to that in a moment. But guys, if you want to know more, that particular post or that YouTube site, it's worth looking into, especially that one. Now, again, if you want to know more about Azure, listen to some podcasts by a guy named, I'll get to that one now. Listen to some podcasts by Matt Kerber. Matt Kerner, my apologies. There's a really comprehensive podcast in there. I really liked it. It explains, it equates COCO to the holy grail of blockchain industries, and there's an absolute valid reason why that is. It's because it becomes the intermediary between the ledger level and the private sector via the public chain that is Ethereum. And also, if you want to check out more, Mark Rusinovich, he's also a key developer of the Microsoft Azure network, and specifically has a lot of knowledge on COCO. He explains in detail in this particular website how COCO works and why it's so important. I wanted to just provide a quote from a very important figure in the private enterprise as a component of blockchain industries, and that is one of the key developers of, or key proponents of, the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. His name is Joseph Lubin, and he is a founder of Consensus, and they're going to be doing some ICOs soon, but some of the stuff that he represents is right up there with the best of blockchain technologies. And he says that Microsoft's COCO framework represents a breakthrough in achieving highly scalable, confidential, permissioned Ethereum or other blockchain networks that will be an important construct in the emerging world of variously interconnected blockchains. Need to have some more coffee. Sorry, that's just my dog. It's okay. So, what I wanted to say is that, like never before, COCO is going to be a game changer for the blockchain industry, because suddenly it's opened doors for business. Once this gets going, and it will very soon, several businesses are going to be jumping on board with their investment dollars via smart contracts, via the asset-based plans of these blockchains, so that they can simply, confidently and easily transfer their outdated systems with the brand new one that is blockchain. It's really exciting. So think of it like this. Think of Neo and Ethereum as main chains, as hubs for business, because that's what they're going to be. And Neo stakeholders are going to benefit from that. They're not going to be left behind because of these capacities with COCO and with this cross-chain interoperability. I'm really excited for the future of Neo. Okay, moving on, let's just have a quick look at some other key information. So on this particular website, which is a YouTube entitled Introducing the COCO Framework, what it does is it evidences something that I was talking about with scalability. If you go to 827 roughly around there, what you'll see is two clocks, as you can see on screen, that show the scalability capacity of the COCO framework compared to Ethereum. Now guys, evidence is in there, and this is coming directly from the Microsoft Cloud platform. Now again, I'll say two things. It's off-chain, it makes everything scalable in a way that's better than Plasma. Two, it's coming from the Microsoft Cloud platform, and there's a lot of evidence to show that Neo is intrinsically linked with the Microsoft Cloud platform in terms of research, relationship, and agenda. Microsoft is also one of the key partners of Neo right from the outset. So there's a vested interest in getting Neo going from the outset, with Microsoft building not only their own capacities in initially the West, but also in the East. And then from there, who knows how far this could go. It's going to the moon in so many ways. I hate to use that phrase. It's so built on hype, but truly, this is the real deal when it comes to future investment. It's not like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is built on its capacity to remove the third party. It's the complete opposite, and there's going to be a valid position for both perhaps, but one is much more reliant on the trustless nature of the blockchain, whereas this is based on the trusted aspect of it. Okay, now getting to some heavier stuff, let's move on. I wanted to talk to you about some interconnections with Microsoft Azure, as I was alluding to, and Neo. Now, this is a post from 2016, but it's irrelevant because it shows you, from the Neo Smart Economies post, it shows you a direct connection between Microsoft Azure and Neo. And that's been commonplace ever since the beginning, but you want to see the word Azure. The more you see that, the more confidence you have that there's something going on with those two major corporations. Now, in here, I wanted to also talk about a post that was written in Chinese, and this is freaking amazing. As I said, there's every likelihood that Azure is interconnected with Neo, but here you can see on August the 14th, there was actually a program training facility set up by Neo and Microsoft Azure, and you can see here there was a lot of there's evidence that they were partners in this venture. In connection with InnoSpace, which is like an educational space in China. Now, what's really important is that you understand that this is about programming and this is about training, and it happened 4 days after the Microsoft team released Microsoft Azure. So 4 days after release, it suddenly decides to get the Neo team together and start training up people on what. So imagine if that is to do with COCO, or if it's anything like it. That means that they are getting more conditioned and prepared for the enterprise environment, and they're doing that with Neo in mind. They're not doing without. You can actually see on that screen, it's not on-chain, but Neo, and that is really exciting. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is, and I hope I haven't bored you too much because I love Neo, is two things. Firstly, you can see from the symbol here that the COCO framework is built with Ethereum in mind. The very symbol itself evidences that, and again, if you weren't aware of the interconnection and you haven't got Ethereum, it's something to be aware of, because lately the Ethereum prices have been pretty good in comparison to Bitcoin, and we want to see that, because if you know about the tech, you want inroads into the investment. You don't want it to be out of your reach. And finally, I just wanted to mention, before I give you some tips on some things I'm actually looking at in terms of current and prospective investments and businesses, I watched a very detailed presentation of Eric Zhang, and Eric Zhang is the technological counterpart of Da Hongfei in the CEO level of Neo. And he went at great lengths to explain the fundamentals of NEO and how it works. And more importantly, he really does a good job of explaining why it's better than Ethereum. Now, it doesn't matter if it's better, because Ethereum is going to be a major game changer too. But the fact that it is better is really good for the NEO stakeholder. So I'm going to explain to you exactly what he said in terms of the key points. He said that the real value of NEO rests with its digital assets. I'm going to explain a little bit more. He's talked about how NEO is 1, Turing complete. It is 2, it runs on any business logic for its smart contracts. 3, it has a third layer of digital and an asset layer. And within the asset layer, there are things like native assets, voucher assets, and trust assets. That's important for us, and this is why. Because basically the voucher asset works as what's known as a digital proof. And in that way it works like a share. So if you have an investment in NEO, you have an actual stake in the company. You have a real governance-based investment that functions at the voucher level as a real shareholding of the company. In terms of trust, it's also really good because it means that it guarantees, the trust aspect acts like a guarantee for digital cash to be exchanged for some sort of pegged currency. So there's a lot of confidence I have in that, and also he said that moving on there will be a development for multiple computers to run codes through its virtual machine. Now on the screen you can actually see Eric talking about the virtual machine. NEO's virtual machine is far more sophisticated than any other virtual machine in the world, including that of Ethereum's. And also within that, NEO has its own virtual studio, and Ethereum does too, and they both are run by Microsoft. So again, there's a lot of interconnections. As I dug deep, I realized, oh my God, there's so many things Microsoft are doing to benefit their own means by interconnecting with NEO and interconnecting with Ethereum. And they're doing that to facilitate the uptake of these particular blockchains in the business sphere, and they have a vested interest because they have a part ownership, certainly of NEO, and I would imagine that of Ethereum to an extent as well. So guys, honestly, it's absolutely worth checking out some of this research. I found it really interesting and amazing. I also wanted to mention that in the research I did with a hacked article that I couldn't show you because you have to buy into them, the hacked article also raised the point that NEO will be combined with the Microsoft Azure cloud on the technical community with technical community developers, and there'll be training for that, as I've mentioned. There will be an exchange of information shared via the Azure program, and basically there's going to be a functionality that if it's not COCO, it's going to be COCO-like in the things that are happening in NEO. So it's just so exciting. So to recap that and to finish off, I want with the talk about NEO, I wanted to finish with a discussion or a Twitter interaction I had with Craig Wright. I just need some more coffee. So what I've been talking to Craig Wright on Twitter, and I do believe that he is Satoshi. He knows way too much about the key protocols and key fundamentals of Bitcoin. He's also a very, very wickedly smart guy when it comes to all things blockchain, and if you ever get a chance to interact with him, you'll see what I'm talking about. But whether he's Satoshi or not, at the level of what he knows, I wanted to ask him what COCO is all about. Sorry guys, we just had some problems with the camera. So I just wanted to say, with Satoshi, with Craig Wright, I've been talking to him, and as you can see on screen, basically, I knew he wasn't going to like COCO because it means that there's even more reason for enterprise to move away from his initial intent and to centralize the system. But the thing is, people need to realize, I think, that it's not about centrality. It's not about centralizing the system so much. It's about capitalism. It's about the marketplace. It's about what already exists today. It's about being a realist. And unfortunately, as much as I don't want to admit it myself, by even partaking in the ecosystem itself of either NEO or Ethereum, you are going to be indirectly investing your money in enterprise, because that is the way in which this is being built. Now, we could be a bit like the heretics of the day, and we could try and grab our banners and start protesting. But the truth is that if you're an investor, the real growth is in enterprise. And so for that reason, I wanted to know what Craig thought, and his response was he believed that the COCO framework is terrible. It's bad for him. So you want responses like that. You want that because if he's not backing it, then from the ideological mindset that he does have, and a very valid point, no doubt, then it just simply reinforces the quality of your investment because it is aligned with the world of business. It is aligned with blockchains that are about to be built by all kinds of businesses around the world, and they're all going to be filtered through specific main chain blockchains, and they are going to be Ethereum, Neo, and a few others. Obviously, if you've watched my other stuff, I think Icon Foundation is going to be one of them. South Korea is not to be balked at, it's not to be dismissed. It is a real, genuine player in the blockchain sphere. So, it was just interesting as a post. Now, I'm going to quickly finish off by giving you a couple of bits of information about what I'm interested in at the moment, what I like. I like Chainlink. I like ADDX. I would encourage you to go and look at ADDX. I like Civic for many reasons, and I really like Loopring. So guys, that's basically my post today. I wanted to also finish off with this. If you haven't checked out the recent news about what's happening with the Bank of China, I would encourage you to do so because there's some really senior players in that space who are making some huge calls with regard to the possibility of a nationalized currency or a digital currency. But all in all, Neo looks more than amazing. I would have said, I've always said it, I've always bought in lows. I've always bought when I thought it was a low and then it's dropped further, and I haven't worried because there's no question whether we think it's going to be $100 by Christmas, whether we think it's going to be $1,000 by next Christmas, it doesn't matter. What matters is that if you understand the technology, you understand the future of Neo now, that's where the investment is valuable. So on that note, guys, I hope you found this informative. I hope you found it useful. And if you like it, don't forget to click the bell down here somewhere because that click will allow us to communicate better because you'll be able to receive all of my posts. And also, if you do like it, let us know by clicking the like. And more importantly, drop a comment because I do respond to every comment and I really do appreciate your time. So until next time, guys, it's BlockchainBrad signing off.